Hello, BookTube. You know how people often say that celebrity deaths happen in threes, and I've noticed that we lost three great writers in the span of 24 hours, something like that. But lately, I've noticed that my books are happening in threes, and I don't know what explains that, but I thought I'd share them with you. Like for instance, the Itati Renaissance Library, put out by Harvard University Press. The Itati Library is their Renaissance answer to the Loeb Classical editions, where you have the original language on one side and an English language translation on the other. Only unlike the Loeb Classical Library edition, quite a few of the Itati volumes are the first ever translations of that work into English. I have loved the Itati Library for a long time. I'm on Harvard's list to get new releases, but recently they have added something to that, or maybe it's not recent, and I just didn't know about it beforehand. And that is the Itati Library of Renaissance Studies. So not student trots of works, but rather books published about the Italian Renaissance. We saw a couple of those. We saw, back before I knew what it was, quite what I was getting, we saw David Marsh's biography of Giannozzo Manetti. In this, it looks like this with the gray bar over the author's name. And then we saw A Convert's Tale by Tamar Herwig. It was the same thing. It looked just like that as a uniform thing. And just recently, I got this. Sharon Strocchia's Forgotten Healers. Women healers during the Renaissance. Again, in the same thing. So that now my library of Itati Renaissance studies is 3 books long. And they all look fantastic. The Manetti one is the one that I meant to dig into, and I haven't quite done that yet. So I have these 3 lined up. I love reading about the Italian Renaissance. The idea that there might be a whole library of these things is a source of joy. Once again, God bless university libraries. God bless university presses. Because who knows, where would these authors have gone with these texts otherwise? But that was the first of the 3s that I noticed. Then I got this in the mail. It's so beautiful that I haven't even unwrapped it yet. This is Penguin Classics. You've seen me unload unhaul some of them on this channel. You can see them up on the top shelf there, on the tall bookcase behind me. Penguin Classics has begun doing gorgeously designed cloth binding, beautiful naked hardcovers of classics. And I have quite a few of them. There are quite a few that I don't have that I wish I did, but I have quite a few of them. That whole top shelf is basically them. And I just recently got 3 tied up with a bow. Look at that. Isn't that lovely? Aren't they wonderful? They said the folks at Penguin sent me Jew the Obscure, War of the Worlds, and Tales from the 1001 Nights. So this was another example of books coming to me in 3s. This is fantastic. Sooner or later, I will have to work up the nerve to unwrap these and go through them, see what editions these are, what translation, all that good stuff. But I haven't had the nerve yet because it's so nice. And then you have seen on this channel, I have been slowly building a trio of books, of literary studies. Ordinarily, I find formal literary studies to be incredibly tedious, just incredibly so, because the authors who grind them out have had any kind of individual prose style hammered out of them by graduate school. So the books they produce on some of the greatest writers of all time are, ironically enough, some of the most boring books of all time. But there have been exceptions recently. Like, for instance, this thing, which occupied me for a solid week. I still go back to it. I have pages turned down. I have tons of underlining. This is by Brian Copenhaver, and it is Magic and the Dignity of Man, which starts out as Pico della Mirandola's oration on human dignity, but it ends up being, look at the size of this thing, it ends up being about not only all of Pico, but all of the shadow that Pico has cast and all of the stuff involved in the intellectual history of his time. Just an incredible work. And I thought it would be sort of an outlier, but it's not. It's not. Just recently, on this channel, you saw me get Joseph Frank's lectures on Dostoevsky. Not nearly as big a thing, but Frank is the Dostoevsky expert, and these are things that most people, even like me, fans of his work, would not have read. So that struck me as, okay, well, that they go on the same shelf, and isn't that weird? And then I got a third one. And if anything, I'm a big fan of Pico because he was a super hottie. But this really hits the Steve spot. This is by Gordon Teskey, and this is Spencerian Moments. And this is a collection of very spirited essays. I've read 5 of them so far on Edmund Spencer. on the Fairy Queen. And look at the size of this thing. This is from the folks at Harvard University, and I couldn't help but think of these other two books when I got this third one. These are three great, for want of a better term, literary studies that I'm going to gobble right up. And it happened in threes. And then another example would be that I had an appointment in downtown Boston very early this morning, rudely early this morning. And I figured, it's been my long-standing practice that if I have to do something unpleasant, I treat myself to something pleasant to sort of leaven things out. And since I was going to be downtown Boston anyway, I went to the Brattle Bookshop. And there I got 3 books. And not just 3 books, but 3 books on a theme. Totally unforced on my part. They're all books that are going to go right in this room. I've said repeatedly, more often than I listen to, I've said that my goal at shopping for books at the Brattle Bookshop, those of you who maybe don't know what I'm talking about, is it's a great used bookstore in the heart of Boston. My goal there should be to shop for books that will end up in this room, that will be long-term keepers instead of brief curiosity. It's been extra tempting at the Brattle lately to indulge in brief curiosity because they bought a gigantic collection of murder mysteries. Just gigantic. And you look at those things and you go, ooh. But I get murder mysteries in the mail, plenty. I don't need to go and buy them at the Brattle and then go through them like crap through a goose. But today I found 3 books that are coming into this room. 3 books on collections of book reviews, for which I have 2 whole bookcases. And the first one that I want to show you is one that I had in this room. I believe that in my first library tour, I probably showed it to you. And I think somebody wanted it. I don't think it was one of you. I think it was a fellow critic wondered if I would send it, and I did. And so I didn't have it. I made a mental note at the time. Remember that you don't have that. So the next time you see it at the Brattle, you can grab it again. And I did. It's Bamboo by William Boyd, who is probably familiar to most of you as a novelist, as a kind of third-tier novelist, the author of Brazzaville Beach and A Good Man in Africa. But he wrote book reviews all through the 80s and late 70s, and never really, as far as I can tell, during that decade at least, never really turned down an active brief, and he's really, really good. Another example, probably, of the thing that I mention on this channel often, of a writer who, if there were real money in writing book reviews and literary essays, would probably have been better suited to stick to that rather than to do fiction. Not that I have anything tremendously against his fiction, but there's nothing in the novels that I've read by this man that's anywhere near as eloquent or thought-provoking as his essays and criticism just collected in this book. He's brilliant on almost every author that he touches. You can tell in the pieces collected in here whether or not he's just dashing through something because it was on his work pile for too long, or whether or not he's digging in and really meaning it. And when he digs in and really meaning it, which happens often throughout this book, he's just brilliant. So I'm glad to have this again, and especially since I will try to enforce my new rule in 2020, which is that if somebody contacts me and says, I really, really want that book, instead of saying, oh, well, I'll put a copy in the post tomorrow and mailing them mine, I will instead say, okay, well, I'll find you a copy. You've seen on this channel, I find everything. Sooner or later, I find everything, and nobody has an urgent need for books. That's the nice thing about dealing with books. It's not heart surgery. If I can manage to stick to that, then I won't be rebuying these books for this room all the time. But the next 2 were not in this room. They are, but not in these editions. And in this case, the edition matters to me. So much so that I actually had these things in my cart at Book Depository for $20 a piece and was going to buy them. And just I was an inch away from doing it. And then, I don't know, I decided against it. I think I might have just thought, no, don't bother to do that. The Brattle will provide. Or maybe I thought, you have them already. You have perfectly good hardcovers on your shelf. And spending $20 on it to get a cover, an edition that you like, is not the kind of book buyer you are. So you should really dump these. And so I did. And boy, am I glad I did. Imagine how chapped I would feel if I saw these things for $1 a piece today after having bought them like that at Book Depository. And this is something that we've mentioned on this channel before. We've seen it when we were doing my books on book reviews and book essays. This is John Updike, an author whose fiction I can't stand, but whose nonfiction, whose book reviews, he was constantly doing book reviews his whole life. I genuinely tend to like. And I found 2 of them in the editions that I want. Picked up pieces, these floppy new trade paperbacks, and Hugging the Shore. I had both of these in my cart at Book Depositories, and now I don't need them. And that was also three. That was 3 books I found at the Brattle, all on the same theme and all on the same impromptu visit. So that's great. And that's not the end of the 3s either. The last 3 that we have is the mail. I got 3 packages in the mail. So I thought we'd open those to finish out this. Let's see what this first one is. Oh my. Oh boy, oh boy. Okay. This comes out in the new year. Oh, not long into the new year, though. This comes out in late January. This is Colin O'Brady. Maybe some of you might recognize that name because he was briefly famous. This is his book of crossing the Antarctic alone. Just him and his sled, just walking across Antarctica. And it's an amazing, amazing story. So I can't wait to read the book. I can't wait to see if he does it justice. That's, of course, the big risk that you run with people who do this sort of thing, is that, okay, you've had the adventure, but can you do it justice? Will you be the author of The Worst Journey in the World, or will you write something boring? Will you be Mary Kingsley, Travels in West Africa, where you not only had the adventures, but then did right by them on the printed page? Not everybody can do both. Or will you not? And I guess I'll find out in the new year whether this does. So that's the first of our 3. And then the second one here. What is the second one? Oh my. Okay, this is late getting to me. But I mentioned this on this channel. I mentioned that I was a little irritated that I hadn't got this originally. This is December 3rd. This is a New Virginia Woolf book. Not new by her. I think she's done. She, as someone used to say, as the old joke was about Johann Sebastian Bach, I think she's done composing. Now she's moved on to decomposing. But this is a fascinating thing, because this is Virginia Woolf and the women who shaped her world. And we think of, the women of the Bloomsbury set, but this book, I believe, ranges a lot further than that. Let's see here. This acclaimed stylist and scholar, Gillian Gill, reintroduces us to Virginia Woolf, this time through the eyes of the women who shaped her world and art. It's a critical biography with a controversial new thesis that Woolf's and her sister Vanessa Bell's sexual abuse as children forever warped each one of them, yet in strikingly different ways. The author delivers bold new insight regarding the fallout of the abuse for the sexual tenor of Bloomsbury and the sisters' relationships itself. But she casts the book casts its gaze over Woolf's mother, her aunt, her sisters, her female friends. It looks like it's going to be just a fascinating new look at Virginia Woolf, and I'm always up for that. We'll see how well it's done. But this is the pub date on this is December 3rd, so right now. And then we have this last one for this bookish day in 3s. This has been a bookish day in 3s. What is this? Oh, okay, great. Oh, all right. This is from Tor.com. I appear to be on their mailing list now. That's fantastic. Don't know how that happened. That's fantastic. I'm going to have to start. Oh, I love reading these things. I'm going to have to start writing about them as well. This is by Corey White, and it's called Repo Virtual. It's an action-packed cyberpunk heist story about a thief who unintentionally steals the world's first sentient AI. Set in a futurist Korean city called Neo-Songdo, where citizens see everything through a corporate virtual reality that masks both graffiti and the night sky. Repo Virtual presents a version of our world where the line between a person's real and virtual lives is nearly indistinguishable. Okay. And the author, who is Corey White when he's at home, he's a writer of science fiction, horror, and other harder-to-define stories. He studied writing at Griffith University on the Gold Coast and is now based in Melbourne. Okay, fantastic. If I am on Tor.com's list, that is wonderful. That is wonderful. I will start to. This comes out in this comes out in April. So I will start paying them the attention that they deserve, because I want to be on their list. I want to be better read in contemporary science fiction than I am. I mean, I read the journals, the periodicals. I read Asimov's and Science Fiction and Fantasy and Analog. And Clark's World sometimes, but nothing like enough to really have, a broad view of what's out there. And I want to know what's out there because a lot of it interests me. Fantastic. Okay. Great. Well, for a trio of books, that wasn't that bad. So we have science fiction in the new year. We have a new study of Virginia Woolf to round out this year. And we have The Impossible First. Colin O'Brady tracking his way across Antarctica alone. And then writing about it with whatever remaining fingers he has. And that's it. That is books in threes. I just wanted to show you that because I noticed it and I couldn't keep it to myself. It's exactly the kind of bookish detail you want to share in Vlogmas. So I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube. Thank you, BookTube. And thank you, BookTube.